They love to call Donald Trump an oligarch, don't they? There he was in Saudi Arabia hanging out with princes and kings and billionaires. There he is accepting a luxury jet from Qatar. The other day, I saw a billboard on the highway going into Detroit that said, "Stop the plutocrats." And of course, the demonstrators even compare him to Adolf Hitler. But if you're watching this, you know that that is crap. And Bobby Kennedy Jr. came out and said it in the most uncertain terms in the Oval Office on Monday when he praised Donald Trump's historic actions to slash prescription drug costs. He attacked Democratic mouthpieces like Elizabeth Warren or Robert Reich, who are saying that President Trump is on the side of the oligarchs. There has never been a president more willing to stand up to the oligarchs than Donald Trump. And I'm very proud of you, Mr. President, for your courage. But remarks from RFK Jr. are not going to stop the narrative. And the narrative is that Trump and his wealthy supporters are the problem. But the real oligarchs, the ones truly pulling the strings and profiting from the existing financial system and from global chaos, are the very people who are pointing the finger. At Promethean Action, we've been tracking their networks, their funding, and their tactics for decades. I'm Susan Kokinda, and this midweek update is going to expose who these real oligarchs are and how their primary means of control is shaping the way you think, how President Trump is challenging their system with strategic and economic policies that are unprecedented in our lifetimes, and most critically, what you need to understand to help win the battle for America in 2026. So, who are the real oligarchs? It's not just rich people. The term oligarchy comes from ancient Greece, and it means rule of the few. And throughout history, those few have ruled through war, money, and ideological control. Those few are the global financier elite, which since around the time of the American Revolution could be found in the institutions of the Anglo-Dutch imperial system. Today, they are deeply intertwined with British intelligence and its subsets in the United States. George Soros is the poster child. His propaganda training and financial power comes from Britain. But it goes much deeper. The oligarchy operates through a complex web of private equity funds, tax-exempt foundations, 501c3s, 501c4s, all meticulously designed to profile, manipulate, and control public opinion in America and worldwide. And what they do is they obscure the real battle lines. They propagate ideologies that divide us. On the left, it's the hyper-individualistic of, I can be any sex or species I want, which is obviously detached from reality. And on the right, it takes the Adam Smith-inspired form of, I'll make a profit any way I want, even if it means gutting our industries and shipping jobs overseas. Both extremes are weaponized to sabotage President Trump's American system resurgence and the idea of a unified, productive nation. And it's not just the Democrats. Trump has to fight a libertarian-infected faction in the Republican Party, including those who fought him on raising the debt ceiling, which did have to be done in the short term so we can begin to grow our way out of the crisis. Or the Heritage Foundation-influenced congressmen who are always pushing cuts to programs like Medicaid that right now millions of working-class MAGA families actually rely on. As Republican Senator Josh Hawley himself warned in a New York Times op-ed, these are the kinds of conservative actions that could lose the 2026 election for Trump. These different factions are prime examples of how underlying British system contaminated ideologies serve the real oligarchs. The real oligarchs include Big Pharma, Big Tech, the military-industrial complex, Big Ag, the central banks, with their deep state connections, their control over media narratives, and their vast financial resources. So how can President Trump actually take them on? Well, he has two things going for him. He has, as RFK Jr. said, quote, the intestinal fortitude, the stiff spine, and the courage to stand up for the American people. But he also has a grand strategy, which isn't always obvious if you're trapped in the day-to-day news cycle. He's strategically hitting them where it hurts. And that's where you come in and where you have to think more and more like Donald Trump. He knows where he's going. He thinks like a general. He has a core team executing his policies. And he needs you to stop reacting to every blip on social media and to get off of the enemy's territory and force them onto ours. That's how we at Promethean Action have been fighting for decades, and that's why you should join our fight by subscribing or, better yet, becoming a supporting member. President Trump is directly challenging the globalist system itself. How? By fostering real physical production here in the United States, promoting economic nationalism, and forging direct relations with other countries, bypassing or dismantling institutions and policies which serve the global oligarchs. So consider President Trump's groundbreaking trip to the Mideast, which is ongoing as we broadcast. The mainstream media immediately paints a picture of hobnobbing with oligarchs. But what really happened? As Trump himself highlighted, he was celebrating the 80-year partnership with Saudi Arabia that began when President Franklin Roosevelt met with King Abdulaziz aboard the U.S. Quincy in 1945 without the British. That meeting infuriated Winston Churchill and the British Empire, which was determined to keep the region as a perpetual cockpit for war under their thumb, and which unfortunately until now they have pretty much succeeded in doing. In his speech in Saudi Arabia, President Trump directly took on the consequences of that British strategy. You've seen it in the form of the neocon regime change policies of recent decades, policies pushed by both Democratic and Republican presidents and Congress. Trump lauded the new generation of leaders who are transcending the ancient conflicts of tired divisions of the past. And he made the point that this great transition away from chaos and war has, quote, come not from Western interventionists or flying people in beautiful planes giving lectures on how to live and how to govern your affairs. He received a spontaneous standing ovation for announcing that the U.S. is ending the devastating sanctions against Syria, a direct blow to the Western interventionist policies that have destroyed that nation. These last several days have seen other extraordinary actions in kicking over the oligarchs' geopolitical chessboard, with President Trump's personal interventions into resolving the Russia-Ukraine, India-Pakistan, and Iran conflicts, not to mention his growing rift with the perpetual war hawk Bibi Netanyahu. Those are all works in progress, but the oligarchs are scrambling to somehow keep their footing in a world where sovereign nations are once again the principal players. And look at the economic side of this trip. Trump announced historic deals, including two $5 billion investment funds covering energy and aerospace and defense. This is keeping with other actions he's taken in creating new channels to fund capital directly into American industries. This is a clear end run around the Federal Reserve and Wall Street's chokehold on our domestic economy. While Trump verbally spars with the Fed's Jerome Powell, he's quietly setting up alternate capabilities to finance domestic production, not to mention the sotto voce discussions of a new Bretton Woods, which would replace the post-1971 globalist-run financial system. So this battle is monumental, and the stakes couldn't be higher as we look toward the crucial 2026 midterm elections, which are absolutely life and death for the continuation of Donald Trump's presidency. The enemy will stop at nothing in their attempt to crush this movement. If they regain full control of Congress, they will undoubtedly try to impeach him or even jail him and anybody else who stands with him. Now, you might look at the current disarray in the Democratic Party and say, we have it in the bag. Their national approval rating is in the low 20s. They're plagued by vicious infighting. The new woke Democratic National Committee vice chair has set up a PAC to primary other Democrats, and there are now moves to oust him. In Michigan, squad member Rashida Tlaib is backing a primary opponent to the incumbent Detroit Democrat. Nominal leaders like Gavin Newsom seem to be having an identity crisis, suddenly warning that Bay Area progressivism isn't the future for the party. And the popular mayor of Detroit is running for governor as an independent because he knows the Democratic Party brand is toxic. Seeing all this, it might be dangerously easy to become complacent. Frankly, it looks like we're beating up on an invalid. But that's a dangerous illusion. The real problem, the real threat to victory in 2026, has little to do with the visible chaos in the Democrat Party. Because the real battle lines are not Democrat versus Republican. It's the sophisticated, often hidden, full-spectrum information warfare that's run by British intelligence on behalf of maintaining their system. And that will crescendo against voters as we get closer to 2026. So how do we as the American people effectively fight back? It's by recognizing that the real fight is between Trump's economic nationalism and the entrenched financier elite. It begins by understanding their ultimate ideological weakness and by recognizing and reclaiming our true American identity. As I said earlier, oligarchy means rule of the few. And for these modern few, there are no universal principles. They reject those principles as enshrined in our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. In fact, they label any assertion of such universal principles which recognize the creative potential of every human being, as authoritarian. When you scratch the surface of the claims that Trump is a Nazi or a Hitler, it goes back to this Frankfurt School propagated definition of authoritarianism. So, absent universal principles, they want you to believe that you're merely a collection of appetites, a consumer to be manipulated, or a member of an aggrieved identity group pitted against your fellow citizens. They promote ideologies of hedonism, whether it's monetary or in physical forms, and identities such as perpetual victim or isolated individuals. That's how they divide and conquer. But there are universal principles, and we are a republic, a nation founded on the principle that we are beholden to universal truths, and that's where our power over oligarchy resides. Donald Trump has an uncanny, almost instinctive understanding of this. Now, how much is instinctive and how much is conscious? Well, he's a master negotiator, so we may never fully know. The form this understanding most visibly takes right now is in the rebirth of the American productive identity, an identity rooted in our capacity to discover new principles, to put them to work in new technologies, to grow the real economy, and create a genuinely better future. This is about freeing our fellow Americans from the imposed ideologies of cynicism and limitation, and instead reawakening in them their Promethean powers. That's what President Trump is doing with his plans to rebuild our productive economy and reawaken the American productive identity. If we unleash both our economy and our spirit, we will make the right decisions in the short months leading up to November 2026. That's what the oligarchs are afraid of, and that's the battle plan to beat the real oligarchy. So if this vision of a productive, principled America, an America where your Promethean powers are unleashed, resonates with you, then I invite you to join us at Promethean Action. Help us build this movement and equip it with the policies and principles needed for victory. Visit our website to learn more, become a member, and help us reach our goal of 1,000 paying members to amplify this crucial work. Because together, with this outlook, we can win. Thanks for watching.
Help us reach 1,000 paying subscribers. We just reached 250. Sign up and learn more at PrometheanAction.com.